Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, test and more tests, that's what Pennsylvania students in the schools in our state have to undergo. We're going to try to explain that on this program. We got somebody who can do that, and then guess what? The top stories of the week, it wouldn't be Harrisburg and the state capitol if we didn't have a couple of reporters in to chat about the big stories of the week. We'll do that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, every day you read a story in the newspaper or you watch it on TV or listen to it on radio. You notice I got all the media covered here that about tests and the controversies over tests, how many of them are there. I have Jerry Oleksiak, he's the president of PSEA. And by the way, you're a teacher in the classroom, right?
For 32 years, Terry.
Only 32 years.
An educator, and I still consider myself a teacher. That's what I'll always be.
Me too. Right. So, look, let's go through this and help there's a lot of controversy over testing, how wise it is, how much should we do, how do we understand it. Basically, we have two elements of, I'll call them testing, even though one isn't a test, that students have to undergo. One is called Common Core, which in our state is it Pennsylvania Core?
It's the Pennsylvania Common Core.
Explain to her
that
what's
isn't
that
the
about?
Test. That's standards. They're the standards that the test, the PSSA, which is the Pennsylvania System of School Assessment, is based on.
Okay.
And that's given in 3rd to 8th grade. And we also have the Keystone exam, which is given in 11th grade. And they're just the statewide test. We also have districts do different tests. Teachers do their own curriculum-based assessments.
Already, my mind's starting to bug.
As well it should. It has, you hate to use the proverbs, but this is the tail wagging the dog. The testing has become almost the reason for being in our schools. And fortunately, finally, we're starting to see some of that change.
Yeah. Okay, so you have Common Core. These are, when you say standards, what does that mean? Does that mean proficiency in English and math?
Well, this is what we expect our students to be able to do. So the standards are created based on the Pennsylvania Common Core, not the Common Core. It's the Pennsylvania Common Core.
Okay.
They're slightly different. Those standards are what kids at different grade levels and ages should know.
Okay.
The tests are created based on those standards. This is how it should work. The tests are created based on those standards, and then the curriculum is designed to meet those standards, and then when the tests are given, you're testing what kids have supposedly learned. It doesn't always line up like that. And what's happened recently in Pennsylvania, the standards changed, so the assessment changed, the PSSA changed.
The tests have to change to meet the standards.
And then the cut scores, something else to think about. The cut scores determine whether a student is advanced, proficient, basic, or below basic. That basically how they did on the test, A, B, C, D, if you want to think of it that way. Those cut scores changed as well. So that's why a lot of people are very upset, because the most recent
there was a drop in the scores,
there was a drop in the scores because it was a different test with different scores, different cut scores, but there was really no time for districts and educators to adjust to the new test. So they were basically teaching to the old standards. Old standards,
they have new standards, and the scores dropped, and as a result of that, it looked like that students weren't performing when we really don't know if they were or not.
Well, we do
know.
The tests don't always tell you. The tests are a snapshot. The analogy I'd like to use is if you go to a baseball game and you watch an all-star shortstop, and he goes 0 for 4 and makes 2 errors in the field, you could walk away thinking this guy can't play baseball. The test, any standardized test, is a snapshot of one day, one particular moment in a student's life. To evaluate a student or to label somebody below basic because of how they did on a single test, particularly when those tests and the scores have changed, it's unfair to the kids, it's unfair to the educators, it's unfair to the schools, and it doesn't give you the accurate information that you need to know how a student is doing.
We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to pursue this a bit. If we have any time, I want to talk about the pension framework that has been worked on in Harrisburg. But the more important thing is to get this business of testing. I must tell you, I'm not even sure I mean, you know, as an educator myself, that I fully understand it. That's why we have you on to help us get at the root of this. We'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
I'm chatting with Jerry Oleksiak. He's the president of PSEA. We're at the moment not talking about union matters. We're talking about he's the teacher. We're getting into what's going on in the classroom with Jerry. Now, and then we have something called the Keystone tests, exams.
Right.
I mean, explain them.
Well, those are given in 11th grade in biology. I'm going to like math and English.
Yeah.
English language arts. And they initially were designed as an end-of-course exam that would be used to help assess a student's abilities, help assess, not totally assess a student's abilities in those courses. What happened is they were changed, and right now they're what we call gatekeeper exams. A student has to pass those tests in order to get their high school diploma.
Wow, okay.
Fortunately, just last week, 2 weeks ago, a committee in the Senate, they want to change that. They want to say maybe we need to put a halt on that and at least a moratorium and see if that really is a valuable expense, because they're very expensive tests, and a valuable way to spend our time. And is it, put aside the fact, is it an accurate way to determine if somebody should graduate from high school or not? We clearly believe that it should not be.
Before we talk about moving forward, what you think ought to happen, do you think? I mean, look, I've been a college professor my whole life. I went into a classroom. I gave tests based on the material. I taught the material that I thought was important, and I didn't have to worry about something called, well, if my students passed the standard, did or did not pass the standardized test. So I didn't have to say, well, I'm putting this content in and taking that content out. Right. And I think it's called teaching to the test. Yes. How much of that goes on?
Well, unfortunately, more than it should, because these have become, the key phrase is high-stakes test.
Yeah.
They have become so important they're part of a teacher evaluation, they're part of a school evaluation, and finally, at the national level and at the state level, President Obama recently called for looking at how we use these tests. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which people know as No Child Left Behind, is being reauthorized, and there's a lot of effort being put into lowering the amount of tests and the high-stakes nature of the test. So we would like to see, going back to the PSSAs, we would like to see a 3-year moratorium on using those new scores based on the new test, because teachers and schools need time. They need time to adapt.
So you're not saying don't do it. You're saying let's get it right. Is that basically your message? We're saying let's get it right, and let's not use a standardized test as the benchmark for how well someone is doing. We want to see any good teacher believes in assessment. I guess assessment is a better word than test. It's not all about filling in bubble sheets. It's about how do they do in individual projects, group projects? How are they participating in class? How do they do in tests that the teacher designs? Right.
So there's a whole range of ways that students can be assessed besides standardized tests. The other thing that really upsets me and other educators is that because of the high-stakes nature, because they become so important, other things get pushed out. So we've seen a reduction in art classes and music classes and even phys ed classes. Kindergarten for they don't have the kind of recess they should have because of getting ready for these tests in third grade. It really is.
Oh, I don't think there's
much.
any doubt. There's just enormous pressure on the classroom, the average class, and I don't mean average in the sense that they're not good teachers, just the typical teacher, better way to put it, to try to get into all this curriculum with all of the difficulties that, with students that come to work, some in cases, not fed, not housed in home, I can't imagine a tougher job. I used to say, as a college professor, I thought I had it easy.
Compared to elementary teachers in middle school, high
school, especially.
Well, what I like to keep it simple, I guess, when the kids are standardized and the resources are standardized, then talk to me about tests being standardized. It's not assembly line. They're not widgets. Every child comes different, and we have to. Differentiated instruction, another buzzword.
Yeah, there you go.
We have to differentiate for the kids.
We'll have to get into these other subjects later. We took the whole 2 segments on this, but I think it was important. Thanks for coming in, Jerry. All right, we're going to have a couple of the state's leading reporters. Some big news out of Harrisburg this week. Stay with us. We'll find out what happened.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, welcome back. It was a big, big week in the state capitol. What did they get done, and what didn't they get done? Joining me, as often is the case, is Angela Couloumbis. She's with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Karen Langley. She's with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Both of these reporters have been involved in most of the big stories of the week. All right, Karen, let me start with you. Now, they're trying to get this budget deal done. As this show airs over the weekend, they've got, 3 days before Thanksgiving to conclude this?
That's right. So it's been well over a week since the governor and Republican leaders announced that they had a framework for a budget deal, although one that left a lot of important and very contentious questions unanswered, like, whose property taxes get reduced, who gets more education funding. Since then...
Who's going to pay this? Well, we all know who's going to pay the sales tax, but what does it mean, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, since then, there have been a lot of private meetings, not a lot of big public announcements. There was talk in the Senate of passing or bringing up a bill to eliminate property taxes by raising the income tax and the sales tax. That was pulled, although the sponsors say that it's going to be coming back up. Now, that kind of flies in the face of some of the framework that we had heard about
Let me stop you here. So they got a framework that calls for $2 billion in sales taxes. I'll generalize. $1.4 billion to go to property tax relief. And that would be, they're arguing about how much property tax relief, right, Angela? They're arguing about, is it 15%, is it 20, 25%? And now they have a bill that they're going to vote on in the Senate next week that calls for the complete...
Well, I mean, I think fundamentally what it shows is how difficult a property tax bill and agreement is going to be if they actually want it to stick. And our understanding of why they're bringing up property tax elimination now is because there are people who want to vote on that first before they commit to anything else. Which raises a bunch of questions about how solid the budget framework is and whether it's going to stick.
Yeah, Karen's nodding. Let me go to the... Here's what I hear. I had a State House member on the program last week, chairman of the Education Committee, Republican, and he said, well, I've got to go back and talk to my constituents to see how it affects them. virtually every lawmaker, don't they have to go back and say, well, if we do this, 1.4 billion, who benefits, who doesn't? What about renters? Finish my thought there.
And I think that, as best I can tell, some of the information that they would need to be able to tell their constituents that we don't have yet. The parties involved are saying that we don't have the formulas that would show, which districts win and which ones lose under this.
Yeah, and then renters. Will renters benefit? Will they do something to give renters? I mean, I think the original proposal by Governor.
Right.
Go ahead, finish.
Right. It was part of the original proposal that Governor Wolf put out earlier in the year, but I haven't heard anything for renters. And in fact, one of my colleagues who is a renter turned to me and said, "I can't believe I'm writing this story about something that is going to benefit everybody who owns a house, but does nothing for the rest of the population."
And often the renters are I'm not. Just make this point. Often renters are in need of help.
Sure.
Homeowners. But and then there's the other question, Karen, and that is the so-called back-end referendum. To what extent will they permit or not permit school districts to raise taxes, property taxes, and be completely at the mercy of the state, right?
That's right. There is sentiment among Republicans that if the sales tax is raised to provide all of this relief from property taxes, that they'd better make sure that the local school boards don't just raise the property taxes and eat up all of that increase, and everyone will just have higher taxes. The schools are concerned, though, that if the restrictions are too tight, and what is put on them, that they will just be at the mercy of the state for whatever it chooses to provide them.
Well, if you're a little confused there, so are we. I mean, there's a lot of balls up in the air going on with the budget, and we're still not sure, whether the votes are there to get the framework adopted. Now we have this new property tax, as these reporters have been writing about all week. All right, it wouldn't be a weekly commentary program if the subject didn't turn to the beleaguered Attorney General of the state, Kathleen Kane. Well, what happened this week? There was a hearing. You can go. I'll start with you, Angela. You've been covering this since the very beginning.
Well, there's a Senate committee that is looking at it's exploring the question of whether she should be removed from office. And the fundamental question they're looking at now is whether she has been so hampered by the suspension of her law license that she can't actually do her job in any effective way. So they had a couple of hearings this week. The last one was yesterday, and it's going to be the last one before the committee comes up with its report and recommendation. And what you saw was a sort of very dramatic testimony from her top deputies, 4 of them who sat and were questioned for 2 hours about what it has been like since Kathleen Kane's law license.
I'm going to stop you right there, and we're going to take a break, and then you're going to tell me. Both you and Karen are going to tell me what. Isn't that good? We have leave everybody with a big in suspense. We'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Well, I'm chatting with Karen Langley and Angela Couloumbis, 2 of the state's leading reporters. They've been covering these big events in Harrisburg. We're talking about Kathleen Kane. There was a hearing this week, eventually make a recommendation to the full Senate about whether or not they want to remove the Attorney General, 2/3 votes required. Go ahead. Finny, now, where were we?
Well, I mean, basically 2 things came up at this hearing yesterday. Number one, her top deputy said, we have assumed all of the major decision-making that she normally would make on key criminal and civil cases. And not because she told us, but because we feel that that was the correct thing to do. She hasn't intervened, but she hasn't approved that. That was the first thing. The second thing was that even now that we've done that, there are still potential pitfalls and problems the longer she remains in office with a suspended law license. And the key one being a defendant could challenge the authority of the office to operate.
Yeah. Karen, one of the things that now, this committee has to report to the full Senate. Is it before Thanksgiving?
Yes, their deadline is the day before Thanksgiving. The chairman, as of the last hearing, was saying that they still intend to meet that deadline. Of course, it is always possible that deadline could get pushed back. But as of now, we are expecting to hear the day before Thanksgiving with what the committee has concluded about, how she can operate with the suspended law license.
And it takes 2/3 Now, the governor, with reasonable cause, can remove her upon the 19th century term address, meaning a vote of 2/3, correct?
That's right. But before that would happen, they have to notify her that there will be a hearing on her removal. So this isn't the last public hearing that we're going to see on this issue.
So then it looks like there'll have to be one next week if that's the case, unless they postpone it until...
I can't see it happening in December, frankly, not with all of the budget uncertainty. I see it being pushed into
All right,
January.
Karen, you wrote a story this week about judges. They have to, right now there's a mandatory 70 retirement age. That could change. Notice the word I used, could. Bring us up to date on the voters are going to weigh in. Go ahead.
So for to change the Constitution where this retirement age for the judges is one of the ways you can do that is by having votes by the House and the Senate in consecutive 2-year sessions, and then the voters weigh in. Now, as of this week, that proposal to allow judges to retire 5 years later at 75 has cleared these legislative hurdles, and so we're expecting that next year this will be on the ballot for voters to say what they think about it.
If I got it, April 26th, primary election day, right? So change the Constitution. You and I chatted earlier in the week. I couldn't find, did you ever find, we were finding out the last time, this is really arcane, the state constitution. I thought it may have been way back in 1978.
Apparently there was something in the early 2000s for a constitutional amendment, but I still haven't pinpointed it.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that when this vote last came up earlier this week, I talked to somebody who monitors state courts nationwide who said that that there have been efforts by legislatures in many states to do things like that, like judges retire later, but that voters often reject them and then say that they don't want to keep people in office longer. So we'll have to see what folks think here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and given the situation with some of the controversies on the Supreme Court, that might not help. We'll have to see and follow the campaign. But look, I want to thank both of you coming in. Good, solid, great updates as always, and we'll continue to follow many of these stories. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.